I was 19 years old, I experienced pregnancy once. I, a first-year college student at the time, went with my nervous boyfriend to seek permission for our marriage from my parents. Of course my father was furious. What on earth are you thinking? Being underage and all? I still remember vividly how my father said those words as soon as he opened his mouth. In the midst of the tense atmosphere, my mother quietly said the following words. "And what about the child? But are you going to have it?" I locked eyes with my partner, who was 4 years older than me, to confirm our decision, and then looked straight at my mother as I responded, "I won't have the baby." Then my mother said, "What about your dream? You wanted to become a news anchor, right? Given the current situation, I think it will be difficult to pursue that dream." My dream was to become a news anchor. My dream was to appear as the main anchor on a nightly news program, looking sharp and confident. However, now that I had a child, I thought to give up on that dream, but I had made up my mind. I want to have a child with him, more than fulfilling my dream of becoming an anchor. Upon hearing that, my father left the room with a look of disbelief. On the other hand, my mother silently looked at me. It seemed like she was conveying with her eyes that having and raising a child is not an easy task. After locking my eyes for several seconds, my mother's expression softened and she spoke gently. "I understand. If that's your decision, I won't say anything, but in return promise me that you'll make sure the child in your belly is always happy." 1 month later, I registered my marriage with him. In our first year as working adults, my husband put even more effort into his job while I, on the other hand, dropped out of university and started working as a temporary staff member as a customer service operator. My belly grew larger day by day. When I reached the 5th month of pregnancy, the baby started to kick and move inside my belly. My in-laws bought a crib and a stroller for the baby. Initially, my father, who was furious with me, gradually began to look forward to the birth of his first grandchild. Even though the delivery was still far off, he started sending baby clothes almost every week. However, one day as I was about to enter the 6th month of pregnancy, I felt discomfort in my lower abdomen. It felt like there was something big inside my abdomen, different from the sensation of the baby, with a sense of unease. I went for my regular checkup, and there I received a major shock. Just amidst the unhealed sorrow, I underwent labor induction, using medication, and gave birth to the deceased child. The precious baby that was in my belly just a while ago. Each of my baby, who used to kick my belly energetically, would quiet down when I read books aloud. For the sake of this child, I was ready to give up everything, my dreams, my future, everything. Yet, I couldn't give birth to this child in good health. It took quite some time for me to come to terms with the fact of having a stillborn baby. It was 1.5 years later. I became pregnant again. However, within 2 months of the pregnancy, I also suffered a miscarriage and lost that child. After that, I had 2 more pregnancies, but both ended in miscarriages as well. Having experienced stillbirths and miscarriages repeatedly, my body became less capable of getting pregnant, and before I knew it, I was already 38 years old. My husband and I went through a period of deep contemplation, and ultimately, we decided to let go of the hope of having a biological child and chose to embrace the opportunity of adopting a child. In preparation for accepting an adopted child, we underwent various trainings and workshops. After completing all the trainings, several months later, we headed to a certain infant care facility. And there we met a baby who seemed like an angel. He was a newborn baby, just 2 weeks old. When I first met this child, I was allowed to feed him with milk. When I held the warm and round little baby in my arms, tears streamed down my cheeks. A joy surged within me as if I had given birth myself. My husband and I were completely captivated by every movement of this baby. While holding the baby, I said to my husband, "I want to be this child's mother." My husband nodded firmly and said this, "I want to be his father too." And like this, the baby, Mark, came to our home. Since Mark came, our home has become bright and lively all of a sudden. For us, who had struggled for many years without being able to have a child, Mark's presence was truly a gift from heaven. We would go out with Mark every week and take lots of pictures together. On Mark's birthday, we would prepare a feast and celebrate grandly every year. 5 years after adopting Mark, we decided to live together with my husband's parents. That's because a few years ago, my husband's father suffered a stroke and became paralyzed on the left side of his body. Taking care of him has become difficult for my elderly mother-in-law alone. Fortunately, my father-in-law can walk with a cane on his own and can engage in normal conversation. Assistance is needed for bathing and using the toilet, but apart from that, he leads a life that is no different from a healthy person. My in-laws doted on Mark tremendously. My father-in-law would secretly buy toys for him, and my mother-in-law would make his favorite fried chicken almost every day. And my husband would help him with his school homework, though I found myself constantly yelling at them every day. Steve, you shouldn't spoil him like this. Sharon, despite his growing age, it's not good to have fried chicken every day. Hey, you, let him do his homework by himself. It felt as if we had 3 children in our house, and we were living lively and enjoyable days, despite the noise and chaos. After entering elementary school, Sis Mark immediately joined a local sports club and started playing soccer. Through the sports club, I became particularly close with Joe's mother, Brenda, and we started going out for lunch together, even outside of our children's events. Brenda is a young and beautiful woman in her 20s, and I was thrilled to become friends with someone like her. She was a gentle person and not someone who would boast about her own child to others. She seemed to be the type who would internalize her worries and struggle with them alone. She looked up to me as an older sister figure and confided in me about various concerns she had. I felt a connection with her that went beyond just being mom friends, and I sensed that we could become true friends. So, I decided to open up to her about my past experiences of stillbirth and miscarriage. As I shared my story with Brenda, tears welled up in her eyes. Amanda, it must have been really tough for you. Just imagining it makes me feel so sad. So, Mark was a baby born after a difficult journey of trying to conceive, right? When it came to this topic, the usual me would always lie and say, yes, he was finally the one we were able to conceive. That's because I was afraid that if it became known that Mark was adopted, he would be bullied or treated differently by other children. However, I eventually decided to be honest with Brenda and reveal the truth. I couldn't have a child no matter what, so we adopted him. That's how we had Mark. However, she gently held my hand and said this: I'm so glad Mark came into your life. I think Mark's home is absolutely wonderful. I continued to have regular lunches with Brenda after that. There were also times when our 2 families gathered and went to an amusement park together on our days off. The children got along well, and I was happy to have made such a good friend as well. However, as Mark advanced to higher grades, cracks began to appear in our relationship as well. It seems that everything started when Mark was selected as a regular player in the sports club while Joe was not chosen. Brenda gradually started to distance herself from me. Whenever I tried to invite her out for lunch after a long time, she would come up with various excuses to decline. Even when we saw each other during the pickup time for the sports club, she seemed to deliberately avoid making eye contact with me. And then, one evening, the event I had been dreading happened. It was during the summer of Mark's 3rd year in elementary school, past 10:30 at night. I was having a casual drink with my husband, discussing our future plans. The future plans we were discussing were about when and how we should explain the fact of Mark's adoption to him. I think it's about time we tell Mark that he's not biologically related to us. 'Cause I believe we were having that conversation around that time. The dining room door, which had been tightly closed, made a clicking sound and opened just a few centimeters. I'm not Dad and Mom's real child, am I? That's the other day. Brenda said to me, Mark, you don't look like your mom and dad, do you? She even said that maybe you were a child who's found somewhere. Hey, that's just a lie, right? I can't believe that Brenda would say something like that to Mark. I placed my hand on Mark's shoulder and looked into his eyes, saying that, Mark, Burke, you weren't born from my womb, but without a doubt, you are the child of both your father and me. I promise you, it's not your real child. I'm not truly loved. I tried my best to explain to Mark. However, Mark showed no signs of stopping his crying, and my in-laws, who were sleeping downstairs, came upstairs to check on us in the dining room. The 2 of them looked at us and quickly understood the situation. Did you tell it to Mark? My father-in-law said quietly. Feeling embarrassed and regretful, we nodded our heads. We nodded our heads slightly, realizing that we had completely mishandled the way we conveyed the truth upon hearing that my father-in-law let out a deep sigh and spoke to Mark. What's the matter? Mark, are you upset about something like that? My husband and I felt a chill at my father-in-law's words. However, for some reason, my mother-in-law remained calm and continued to gently rub Mark's back. Mark seemed somewhat surprised by his grandfather's words, and his tears naturally subsided. Mark, look at this. This is a photo of your dad when he was born. Saying that, my father-in-law showed Mark an old photograph. It was a photo of my husband being held by his mother shortly after he was born. And here's a photo of you right after you were born, which is next to the photo of my mother-in-law. My father-in-law placed a picture of me holding baby Mark. Take a good look. Can't you see the same smile on the face of the grandmother holding her blood-related son and the mother holding Mark, who isn't biologically related? Don't you think they look alike? Mark kept comparing the two photos and eventually nodded slightly in response to his grandfather's question. What did you think when you saw your mother smile in this photo? Mark then said this in a soft voice. Beautiful. My father-in-law continued with more questions. So your grandma and your mom, they both have such beautiful smiles, don't they? That smile, it's the face of a mother who loves her child. So tell me, why do you think your grandma's smile and your mom's smile look the same? Mike, as my father-in-law asked that question, Mark blinked his eyes and tilted his head, pondering the answer. It's love. The deep love that wells up from the bottom of a parent's heart is what makes them have these kinds of smiles. Well, what I'm trying to say is that blood relation has nothing to do with a parent's love. Do you understand what Grandpa is saying? As my father-in-law said that, Mark nodded vigorously and looked at my face intently. I looked straight into Mark's eyes and said, Mark, you are a son of your father and me? I have full confidence that our love for you is bigger than anyone else's. Then Mark smiled and jumped into my arms. Seeing this, my in-laws looked at Mark with relieved expressions, their gaze filled with gentleness. After that, 25 years passed, and Mark built his own family. Parents' house habits, he spends late nights drinking and talking with his father about the challenges and joys of being a father. He brings me incredibly delicious sweets every time and gives me gentle shoulder massages. And the in-laws who saved our family crisis are now peacefully resting together in the same grave. If it hadn't been for my in-laws back then, we might not have been able to establish the loving parent-child bond we have today. And tomorrow, after a long time, we plan to visit the grave of my in-laws together as 3 generations of our family.